Is Star Wars real? Can people actually use the Force or attain the Tao? Everyone wants a comfortable, easy, long life, but some want it more than others and have decided to try to live forever. Of course, that'd be great, but what if it's not just a pipe dream? What if immortality is much more common than we think? I've talked about the stories of men who never died before, but I didn't talk about the groups of people who were said to be immortal in history. Why do you think Hitler was really so interested in the Untersberg Mountain, where he built a fortress? Why is it said that numerous biblical men escaped death? Why have scores of men and women from the East been seen performing miraculous feats, or disappearing and reappearing over huge amounts of time, like the famed Eight Immortals? From the men of Untersberg Mountain to Melchizedek and Cain, to the Eight Immortals, John Sanfeng, and lesser-known men who you've never heard of in the West, these are the Immortals, the men who never died. We've all heard of a prophesied second coming, but have you heard of a time when Jesus came to earth before he was called Jesus? That's what some think is told in the story of Melchizedek. The Dead Sea Scrolls are the oldest surviving manuscripts of the stories of the Hebrew Bible, plus some apocryphal works. They're about 2,000 years old. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, Melchizedek is called El, or Elohim, which were the words associated with God. This holy being, Melchizedek, would proclaim the Day of Atonement, basically declaring the start of Judgment Day, and then he would atone for the sins of those who were predestined to him, just like Jesus taking on the sins of his followers. That sounds like a great deity who takes on others' sins or karma out of compassion, so that lines up with both Judeo-Christian and Buddhist traditions of gods. The Dead Sea Scrolls also associated Melchizedek with Archangel Michael and the King of Peace. Interestingly, Melchizedek's association as a savior or Messiah predates Christianity, though. So was Melchizedek's story a prediction of a divine being who was to come and be the King of Peace? That's what Jesus was later known as. Or was Melchizedek actually the same person as Jesus, destined to help save people in the future? Or has more than one divine being come to earth to help humanity in different epochs? In Hebrews in the Bible, it's written that Melchizedek has no beginning of days or end of life, and remains a priest for all time. It also says he lives on, unlike mortal men. So whoever he was, it's pretty clear he seems to be an immortal who wanted to help people. Well, what do you think? Jesus and Melchizedek weren't the only men in the Bible who never died, though. There's another man in the Bible whose mark on history wasn't so good. Cain and Abel were the twin sons of Adam and Eve, and Cain was actually the first child on earth.
That's gotta be Cain! That's gotta be Cain!
He was a farmer, and Abel was a shepherd. When they grew to be men, they each made an offering to God. While Abel offered up his best sheep, Cain just brought some produce. God favored Abel's sacrifice more because, you know, he didn't bring him a couple pieces of lettuce.
It's lettuce.
And you're sure it's edible?
And Cain's jealousy of his brother began to grow. Eventually, Cain murdered Abel over some lettuce. So now he was the first man on earth and also the first murderer. God condemned Cain to a life of wandering, but some say he was doomed to an eternity of wandering. Cain was forever marked, and he passed the curse down to his descendants. Some accounts even say he was the world's first vampire, and lore says those guys are immortal too. Now, interestingly, in the show Supernatural, whoever bore the mark of Cain would be possessed by a bloodlust to kill and be influenced by that mark forever. And that matches up with a Mormon belief which says that Cain was a man who desires death but can't have it as he wanders the world, begging someone to kill him and take the curse upon themselves instead. Of course, Shakespeare also described Cain as having red or yellow hair when he described a cane-colored beard. So if that part's true, maybe it really is the case that gingers have no souls. Just kidding. I love you, gingers. Maybe Cain should have been more like the upright immortal men who came after him, like Elijah or Jesus. If the events of the Bible are true, Cain may just be walking among us today, unable to die. Cain is by far the creepiest story of immortality in the Bible. Speaking of weird and creepy, though, nothing is more bizarre than the Immortals of Untersberg Mountain. Untersberg Mountain is part of the Berchtesgaden Alps that straddles the border of Germany and Austria. Its mysteries were so great that Hitler built a house, the Eagle's Nest, at one of the mountain's peaks. Reports say Hitler used to stare at the mountains for long periods of time. Well, Hitler had long had an interest in esoteric pursuits, and the Untersberg area was the place to do it. That's because demons and deities reportedly hid in its hills. But what else did this sleeping dragon hide, as the Dalai Lama called the mountain? Immortals and magic are hidden there. Legends from the past and even modern hikers have reported missing time. Someone will sit to rest and then find that unaccounted for minutes or hours have gone by when they get back up. Some have fallen asleep and woken up in distant lands or encountered a strange group of men who live forever, because it's said that the men of Untersberg Mountain have the Holy Grail. That's allegedly one reason Hitler wanted to be around the place. Unfortunately for him, though, there was also said to be a labyrinth full of mythological creatures under the Untersberg, so it appears he didn't have the power to breach its secrets. And there are also multiple reports of kings in history being secretly buried there, waiting to wake up at the end of the world. One famous tale says the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa didn't die in 1190, but is perpetually there under Untersberg Mountain, sleeping, his beard getting longer and longer as the ages pass. With him is a round table. When his beard grows to be long enough to wrap around the table 3 times, the end of the world will be upon us. Other legends say the king waiting there is King Charlemagne, who is still alive and being cared for by dwarves in the mountain. Every 100 years, Charlemagne wakes up looking to see if there are still ravens flying around Untersberg, and then goes back to sleep for another century. When he finally wakes for good, there will be a final battle and last judgment. But what is it that's keeping these kings alive if all of this is true? The Holy Grail? Or is there some kind of recipe of circumstances innate to the mountain itself that's changing time or even providing the conditions for everlasting life? There's actually a man in Austria who claims to have not only seen these men of Untersberg Mountain, but actually meets with them every year, and he says they're Hitler's SS officers. So did the Nazis find immortals in Mount Untersberg? Are time slips to other realms really happening? From demon hunts, where people are dragged down to the underworld, to legends of a secret cave system beneath the surface, there is a lot going on at Untersberg Mountain. Its mysteries have been compared to those in Mount Shasta in California, and it's also been called the Bavarian Bermuda Triangle. And most interesting of all, Untersberg literally translates to under the mountain in English. So is that a hint there really may be a world of immortals under there? Most Western regional folklore might have the whispers of 1 or maybe even 2 alleged immortals that you hear about. And most of the time, you can chalk those examples up to a curse or someone who got really lucky while concocting an alchemical elixir or something. But the East is unique in that they have legends of immortality weaving through their entire massive sprawling culture, from the Himalayas and beyond all the way to the Pacific. Ever heard of the 8 Immortals? These aren't just men that Easterners praise for great deeds or for conquering new lands. These are men who surpassed what we understand to be human, many of whom, upon obtaining immortality, or the Tao as they call it, left society and escaped to the solitude of the mountains. Did you know that Star Wars was heavily based on Chinese Taoism?
Do or do not. There is no try.
That's why you see Luke cultivating a skill, practicing under a master, Yoda, and using what he calls the Force in place of the Tao to do things men can only dream of, which is all very close to Taoism and the practice of martial arts. In fact, some of the biggest schools of martial arts were all founded by an immortal or passed down by one, believe it or not. Tai Chi boxing was founded by a man, Zhang Sanfeng, a man whose records from the Ming Dynasty show never died. And the martial art Baguazhang was founded by Dong Haichuan, who claimed his teachings were passed down to him by an immortal deep in the mountains. What makes the 8 Immortals so amazing is that they were just men, great men who perfected themselves internally so well that they became something much more, escaping the cycle of life and death entirely. In the Tang or Song dynasty, the 8 Immortals were born. They're said to live in a Taoist city, only accessible by a portal that exists neither here nor there, and that can be reached only by those in the know. It's called the legendary Mount Penglai. It's like the gods' Mount Olympus for Taoists. There are temples and shrines dedicated to the Eight Immortals all throughout China, Taiwan, and Singapore. But why do people think they were immortal? Well, these immortals were seen for hundreds and even thousands of years, coming out to do good deeds and help unexpected travelers. So who are they? There's He Xianggu, sometimes considered the only woman of the group. When she was a teenager in the Tang Dynasty, she was visited by an immortal in a dream who told her that the powdered stones from the bank of a river would grant her immortality. She was so moved, she ate some and found that she could float across the sky, freed from the clutches of death. So I guess it's true. Diamonds really are forever. There's Lu Dongbin, the legendary scholar from the Tang Dynasty. Lu Dongbin had to endure 10 trials in order to be accepted as a student and learn how to cultivate into an immortal, including tests of emotion, self-interest, lust, greed, honesty, fear, and more. In one of the most famous stories, Lu Dongbin was cooking yellow millet when he dozed off, and something unexpected happened. A time slip. First, Lu Dongbin dreamed that he'd passed his school tests with excellence, so he was able to get a fantastic job. Then he was promoted to vice minister. Then he married the daughter of an important family and had children. He continued being promoted, finally becoming the prime minister, the head honcho in society. But that's when everything fell apart. Out of jealousy of his success, Lu Dongbin was accused of committing crimes, so he lost his public office. Then his wife betrayed him, his children were murdered by criminals, and he lost all of his money. Finally, as he was dying alone and destitute on the street, he woke up. It was all a dream. It had seemed like 18 years had gone by in this dream, but it actually happened in the time it took to cook his yellow millet. The ordeal had been an illusion created by the master Zhongli Chuan to teach Lu Dongbin not to place so much importance on glory and success. Indeed, it worked, and Lu Dongbin went to be his disciple and eventually perfected himself until he was an immortal. Li Tieguai has one of the coolest immortal stories, though maybe not for him. He studied with the master Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching. Li Tieguai first went to live in a cave avoiding material things to try to let go of his attachment to them. He wasn't tempted by lust, money, or physical things. Now, before becoming an immortal, he was extremely good looking. But one time he decided to leave his body to visit heaven. Oh man. He told his apprentice to wait 7 days for his spirit to return. If he didn't come back, the apprentice was to burn the body because it meant that Li had become an immortal. After 6.5 days, though, the apprentice was summoned home to see his dying mother, so he burned Li's body early. Can you believe that? When Li Tieguai tried to come back to Earth, he found that the only body available to him now was the corpse of a deformed, homeless beggar with a pointy head, big ears, hairy eyebrows, and a lame leg. What would you do then? In true selfless fashion, Li rolled with it. His teacher, Lao Tzu, gave him a gourd full of medicine that could cure any illness, and Li Tieguai brought it to his apprentice's mother to revive her. Li also got to become a full immortal because he had shown a selfless heart. But what about the Star Wars and martial arts I mentioned earlier? Well, there's the story of Zhang Sanfeng, who created martial arts. Wait till you hear his story. Zhang Sanfeng was the Taoist badass in the Song Dynasty who invented Tai Chi and achieved immortality. He was an expert in the white crane and snake styles of Chinese martial arts and the use of jian, the double-edged Chinese sword. He was also an alchemist, but his journey to immortality was way more interesting than that. When he was young, Zhang was sent to the Shaolin Temple to learn martial arts, but the story goes that after mastering all they could teach him, he set off to study Kung Fu martial arts and Taoism on his own. When he was 20, he left the temple and started performing miracles. When a village was in need, he would appear out of nowhere, ready to assist. He'd work with livestock, do backbreaking work out in the fields, or help build a house. But then, after the work was done, he'd suddenly be gone, vanished without leaving a word. But what was he doing out there in the seclusion of the woods he'd disappeared to? Creating Tai Chi boxing. No attack could reach him. No man could stop him. He was able to easily strike down all evil that came his way. But you don't just keep something like that all to yourself. Zhang taught his moves to the monks at the Wutang Temple. That's right, Wutong, who said that Zhang would suddenly appear while they were practicing to see how they were doing. After that, Zhang Sanfeng continued appearing throughout the ages, even 200 years later or more. Nobody knows for sure when he died or even if he ever did. Perhaps his good heart and amazing powers allowed this immortal to go wherever he was most needed, even up until today. From kings still buried beneath Untersberg Mountain to biblical men who lived forever, from the Eight Immortals to pioneers of Eastern culture, spirituality, and martial arts, there have been many groups of immortals in history. But why don't we hear about them this way? It's always one man's story individually, or one legend spread in the West that just becomes a fantastic tale over time. But these stories of the people who gave more to others than themselves aren't just fantastic. They make you think about whether it's really possible to live forever. All of these people showed that before becoming immortal, they could suffer without complaint, be good to other people, and not get dragged down by the world. Easier said than done. But maybe it just goes to show that no matter how much money you have, or how many researchers you put on anti-aging research, if you don't have heart, you don't have anything. What do you think? Have you heard other tales of immortals you want me to do a show on? How about other amazing information about ancient civilizations, like the impossible nature of the pyramids, or the real men who met the devil? Check out my other solo episodes, and also the longer conversational episodes of the Metaphysical Podcast. Also, if you like this type of content, please consider supporting my work by pledging on our website, themetaphysical.tv. With your support, we can give you more exclusive content and products. If you're into merch, check out the awesome t-shirts designed by yours truly by visiting the link in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help the channel grow, and leave a comment because I love hearing from you guys. With that, I hope you thought this episode was out of this world.